Hey, it's me, Bobbert, and welcome to the introduction of my first retrospective series. In this show, I'll go in depth in video games based on game franchise, like Super Mario or Sonic the Hedgehog, or game developers slash publishers, like in this case, RareWare. I decided to tackle RareWare because it's one of my favorite companies. I grew up with the company making so many fantastic games. I'm going to start from the Super NES and probably end it till the end of the Nintendo 64 era, or even as far as the 360. Depends if I can get the game and if I enjoy making these. The game I'm first going to review is Donkey Kong Country, but before we get into that, let's have a little backstory on RareWare. In 1985, RareWare, located in the United Kingdom, was founded by Tim and Chris Stanford, two brothers who enjoy making video games. Before they were known as Rare, they were known as Ultimate Predator Game and making games for the ZX Spectrum. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the ZX Spectrum, but I am going to mention at least two games from them later on in this retrospective series. They moved to making games to the NES, and they were officially known as Rare and making games for different publishers like Tradewest and LJN. The most well-known games were Wizards and Warriors, Snake Rattle and Roll, and of course Battletoads. But they do also make licensed games like Double Dare, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, WWF WrestleMania, and many other sports titles. But those games are probably one of the worst games, especially the games that was published by LJN. Now, technically, I should be starting in the NES era, but unfortunately, I currently do not own one at the moment. In 1994, RareWare showed off a 3D graphic demo, which was made using the Silicon graphic system in a called Nintendo Eye. Nintendo was impressed so much with the demo that they ended up buying 49% of the company, making Rare a second-party developer. Now, I'm assuming that most of my viewers know the difference between first, second, and third-party companies, but for those who don't know what they are, let me offer a quick explanation for each of them. Well, first-party company is your video game console makers, like Nintendo, which currently have the Wii U out, there's Sony and their PlayStation 4, and of course there's Microsoft and the Xbox One. Sega used to be known as a first-party company, making video game consoles like the Sega Genesis and the Sega Dreamcast, but now they are a third-party company making video games for other consoles. Now, a third-party company pretty much has the freedom to make any games on any console. Of course, they need the license from the first-party companies, but for the most part, they pretty much got freedom to make any game, even on multiple consoles. For example, there's Call of Duty having the game available for pretty much most of the consoles. Now, a second-party company is pretty much a kind of like the middleman. They have freedom to make their own games, but the thing is that they can, for RareWare, for example, they can only make games on Nintendo consoles, and for the most part, Nintendo will publish the games that RareWare makes, but RareWare has the option to publish their own games, like for example, Jet Force Gemini and Conquest Bad Fur Day, or even have a third-party company publish some of their games, like THQ does with RareWare's portable games that they made on the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance. By the way, I'm not going to talk much about the portable games that RareWare made. I'm strictly focusing on the console game. And that leads us to our first game that RareWare made with Nintendo, and that game is Donkey Kong Country, a game that I'm going to talk about in my next video. But before I leave you, I just want to give you an idea of how this video series is going to be different than my normal reviews. Now, in my normal reviews, I usually talk about the gameplay, part of the story, and pretty much not to spoil too much of the game, so I can convince you to give it a try. Now in this video series, there's going to be some spoilers. I'm going to talk about at least most of the levels in this game. Pretty much the one that kind of stands out to me the most. And provide some backstory and aftermath, like any beta footage, changes, and, pretty much how well the game sold. It's kind of similar to Oral Story Review, or at least that's what I'm going to try to make it to be. For those who are not familiar with OSW, which stands for Old School Wrestling, it's a podcast that pretty much talk about wrestling storylines, giving backstories about it. And I thought that would be an awesome idea for video games, especially with a company like RareWare, and hopefully this works out pretty well. And that's pretty much it, so stay tuned for my Donkey Kong Country video, and have a nice day.